The death of Queen Elizabeth II has reignited the conversation about Britain's colonial past. Now, because of that history, feelings about her legacy are mixed in many places, particularly in Britain's former colonies. DW's Felix Maringa went to the hotel in Kenya where she heard she was queen. And as you'll see in the report, it's also near where British soldiers later carried out atrocities against independence fighters in the country.
This is where Princess Elizabeth became queen. She was staying in the original Treetops Hotel in Kenya's Aberdare National Park when she was told her father had died, making her the monarch. In the reception of the rebuilt hotel, a book of condolence for guests to write their comments. Amos Ndegwa, a guide who works there, says his father cooked for Elizabeth when she stayed here in 1952.
Queen was very talkative to the cooks, waiters, and they could always call all the staff around who are working in the hotel and then get them together and give them a tip. And they were very happy. When the staff are given money, then they go and help their families. So they were very happy and they liked the Queen very much.
At the time, Kenya was still part of the British Empire. Soon, the hotel became the target of Mau Mau independent fighters. They banned it, like every British establishment they could find.
They have done a mass action all over Kenya. Here in the Central Province, I think they decided to ban the hotel. And that's why they banned the lodge. And nothing was left. The hotel was burnt up to ashes.
It is here at the Treetops Hotel in Mount Kenya that Queen Elizabeth learned of her father's death, and that immediately ushered her into her new role as queen. But just a few months down the line, in October 1952, when the state of emergency was introduced, a few kilometers from here, some of the worst atrocities committed on the Mau Mau fighters were done by the British soldiers under the Queen's watch. Muthoni Mathenge is one of the few surviving Mau Mau independence fighters. She still has nightmares about the brutality of the British soldiers.
I wake up in the middle of the night, screaming, when I remember the harassment that used to take place in the forest. That fight was terribly brutal. The soldiers would storm into the homes, kill the young men and the children too.
Earlier this year, Muthoni Mathenge asked Queen Elizabeth to compensate her for the torture she said British soldiers inflicted upon her. A video of her calling for justice has been viewed more than 9 million times. She says King Charles should now take responsibility.
I have not stopped seeking compensation. In fact, just the other day, I sent word to them saying, the son should send me what belongs to me, and he should send to no one else but Miriam Muthoni Mathenge, who went to fight for Kenya's independence in the forest.
While some will take the opportunity to write in books of condolence, many Kenyans feel there is unfinished business with their former rulers.
To continue the conversation, we've invited Joshua Kwesi Aikins onto the program. He is a political scientist and human rights activist. His areas of research includes development politics from a decolonial perspective. He's working on his PhD at the University of Kassel here in Germany. Welcome to DW News Africa, Joshua. It's a good pleasure to have you on the program. It's been pointed out that Queen Elizabeth II never apologized for the crimes that were committed in the Crown's name during colonialism. Would that have made a difference?
Yes, it would absolutely have made a difference. And you can see that it would have made a difference if you look at how the members of the royal family have actually actively sidestepped apologies. For example, last year on their tour of the Caribbean, where they were met with protests on this very issue, when they were met with demands to apologize. And they found words describing the atrocities of enslavement and such, but they stopped short of an apology. And the simple reason is that such an apology could have legal consequences. Because once you apologize, you have admitted culpability in ways that could find you in court. And because we've just heard from Kenya, I also want to stress the fact that some of these issues are not about the far past, but also about very, very recent issues. For example, a court case will be brought to the European Courts of Human Rights this year, where Kenyans who were displaced under Her Majesty's reign, under Queen Elizabeth's reign, have sued after they have found no redress in British court and have found no redress with the Crown. So this clearly shows that, yes, an apology is called for, an apology would have consequences, and the people who are demanding the apology are now seeking other ways of redress.
A very real example that we saw in Kenya, a living person who could speak to what colonialism meant for her and what it did in her life. But if we can broaden this out to the African context or the continent of Africa, what is the legacy of British colonialism on the African continent?
I mean, the British Empire was one of the largest in history, and it has a centuries-long reign of brutality that stretched, as you know, across the world, but that especially impacted Africa and Africans from the time of enslavement through the time of colonialism, all the way, and we should not forget that, to the so-called post-colonial period, where we again, and including under the reign of Queen Elizabeth, had Britain meddling in African affairs. So yes, there's a long list of brutality, of displacement. There's a long list of colonial theft, and this is true for both artworks and for natural resources. This is true for many of the most glamorous items, in fact, in Elizabeth crown jewels, right? But it is also true for wars such as the Biafran War, where we had Britain supply weapons to Nigeria under the watch of Queen Elizabeth. It is true for Kenya, where, like I just said, and like the Mau Mau fighter also just iterated, we had incredible brutality, including under Elizabeth's reign herself. So we mustn't lose sight of the fact that this is a long history that stretches into the present, where we have millions of people who are alive today that are directly impacted by the injustices, by the brutality, by the theft and plunder that emanated from London, that was orchestrated by the British Empire. Now, the fact that this legacy is a questionable one also becomes very, very clear if we look at the way in which Britain has dealt with this, because there was literally an Operation Legacy that was designed to instruct the that was designed to actually instruct the colonial officials and the Foreign Office workers in the former colonies to destroy a lot of evidence, a lot of documents that would actually prove some of these colonial atrocities. And so orders were given to destroy such documents that would embarrass Her Majesty's the Queen's government. And this included instructions that were very clear about who should even be able to see and access and destroy these documents. In some cases, the people were told that only white people of British descent should even be able to see and able to destroy these documents, because it was clear that some of the racist and colonial policies that were documented there would not just be an embarrassment, but again, could be the base for legal action.
Joshua, what role then could Britain's new monarch, King Charles III, play in having the British monarchy confront and potentially redress the country's colonial past?
Yeah, that's a key question. So what we're faced with is actually a sanitized legacy of the crown when it comes to colonial history. And I think the new king is called upon to actually and actively change that. So there is a very, very clear expectation. There are calls from both South Africa and from India that are specifically about the crown jewels, right, that are now supposed to come into the possession of his wife, Camilla. And people are saying, well, why should that happen? They should be transferred, or some of these incredible gemstones should be transferred to India and South Africa, where they actually come from. But beyond that, people are saying there needs to be an apology and there needs to be redress. We mustn't lose sight of the fact that the crown has incredible wealth. More than 17 billion US dollars are not in British possession, but in possession of the crown. And there are other operations such as the Duchy of Cornwall, which itself is, again, a multi-billion-dollar, or more than $1 billion estate that generates revenue for the royal family for its own use. And so this is where we can see that some of the riches of enslavement, some of the riches of colonialism have been invested and are still benefiting the royal family today. And that is where people are saying this is where we need to have redress. And there's actually precedent in the UK where we had, for example, the University of Glasgow doing a slavery audit where they tried to understand, so how have we as an institution actually benefited from enslavement? And I think the time is ripe for the Crown to undergo both a slavery and a colonialism audit to actually face up their responsibilities.
Oh, intriguing stuff. As always, it's good to have you on the program. Joshua Kwesi Aikins, thank you for your insight and for weighing in on this conversation for us.
Thank you.